hard times force people to adapt and to think and to do more, because there is less. There's a tiny pie left, and simply dropping your price is not really going to be the way out of this.
I'm Brian Rios. I'm here with Ashley Harvey, the GM of AVIAREPS, originally from London. Ashley has worked in several markets throughout the globe, as well as international and domestic companies in Japan, including Visit Britain, Go Central Japan, and now AVIAREPS. How you doing, Ashley?
Very good, mate. Thank you very much. It's been a long while since we discussed this. I think maybe 4 or 5 months we've been planning it, so I'm really pleased. Finally, we're in a position to deliver on what we thought we wanted to do.
Yeah, we had a good dip in the numbers, exactly. And so we can take advantage of it.
Take the advantage, slot it in as quick as possible.
Exactly.
So good. Thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. It's great to have you. I want to go through a few different things. Let's maybe start at the beginning.
Like all good stories should.
So you've been in travel and tourism for over 20 years. What was that initial spark? Like, what initially attracted you to travel and tourism?
I've been actually in Fukuoka for the late 90s, and sort of reached a bit of a glass ceiling in career-wise in that area of Japan, and had the opportunity to go to Singapore. And in Singapore, I worked for a boutique advertising agency, and the only sales portfolio they had for me was hotels and travel and tourism. So it wasn't so much that I was pulled to the market pulled itself to me. And so I was selling advertising space into that segment for a couple of years, including, Raffles Hotel, working with Amex, Sentosa, Singapore Tourism Board. We did some stuff with hotels in Thailand, across in Hong Kong, Malaysia and Indonesia. And increasingly I became quite interested in that segment. And then also at the same time I was just finishing up my MBA, so my thesis naturally sort of gravitated towards that market, on hotels and how do you get the local spirit of an area to shine within your hotel if you're a global brand, that kind of thing, or very cutting edge at the time. So that's really how it all started, back in the early 2000s.
That's awesome.
Were you born then?
I'm old. I've been around. Awesome. And so kind of going through Fukuoka to Singapore, and then you worked in the UK also even after that, right? And so for you, what do you feel like were maybe some of the key learnings from each market that were able to kind of propel you to where you are today with AVIAREPS?
So over the years I've lived in quite a few places, including Italy, Germany, Boston, Hong Kong as well. But particularly with cities like London, Singapore and Hong Kong, they are in their very DNA international. They look outwards. You go to Singapore or you go to London, you go to Hong Kong, and you make money in those places, but much of the money you're making is coming from other markets because it's very outward looking. And that's quite a big difference from when you move to or from a market like that into a market like here, which traditionally is probably a bit more inward looking. It's certainly more domestic focused on many things, rightly or wrongly, but that does create quite a unique business culture. But that also creates opportunities. I think many Japanese businesses would like to be much more outward looking, but it's a big world out there, so where do you start, right? So I suppose people like myself and internationalized Japanese are in a good position to help bridge that gap between, the big bad world out there and Japan. So I think that's it. I think that the key difference really I feel from London, Singapore, Hong Kong to Tokyo is those three cities I think are very outward looking.
Nice. And would you say, you mentioned kind of about how you feel Japan, there's a big opportunity to kind of look outward for someone who is international working in Japan. Is that what sort of made Japan the settling point for you, like the place where you decided to?
No, I think more the out of office lifestyle.
Yeah.
I think the lifestyle in Japan is very comfortable. I can't imagine there's too many places that are better for living. So it was as much that as opposed to the work, but the opportunity is here and increasingly so. I think so. Yeah.
I totally agree, and we've had this conversation before about like
great place to live.
Yeah, it's so easy. Like I haven't driven in like 2 years. Like I don't even.
No. Things work. It's clean.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. And so with that kind of mindset, as far as the travel and tourism industry, there's kind of that big difference between inbound and outbound, even for the Japanese market. What do you feel maybe makes Japanese tourists different from other tourists or other travelers internationally?
Initially, I think the big difference is the willingness to travel overboard. So roughly about 23% of Japanese, only 23%, 24% have passports. So it's quite a small market, and for a country of 126 million, the outbound market is 20 million. To put that into perspective, and if I can remember correctly, there's around about 50 million Koreans, and I think they made 30 million outbound trips. There's 60 million British or so, and we made close to 100 million trips. This is 2019, when the world existed, right? in our world. So I think the initial big difference is a reluctance to travel, which sort of comes back to the point we just made about how comfortable Japan is to live, right? This weekend, it's fairly possible that we could get a flight down to the southern tips of Okinawa and go to the beach, or we could go north and go skiing, or we could stay in Tokyo and be in the world's largest metropolis. So there's a lot to do where you don't need a passport here. So going abroad, there needs to be quite a big desire to do that. I think that's clearly the main thing. I think that the Japanese tend to put a lot of effort into their planning, and they also tend to put on their trips itineraries. So my itinerary, if I go somewhere, might look like I'll wake up and I'll see what happens. Which, when I've mentioned to Japanese friends that this is my plan, I can just see the fear and panic in their eyes. Please, I don't ever want to go on holiday with you. I want to have everything scheduled out. So I think they are really good at planning and researching, and I think perhaps people like myself are much more spur of the moment in terms of what we want to do and why we go somewhere. I think that's quite an important part. So I think in terms of that, I mean, Japan benefited really from 2012, where the yen dropped a little bit and there was this drive to get inbound. I think the waves of inbound tourism that came across the shores until 2019, I think a lot of Japanese realized, you can just kind of get up and do stuff and go somewhere. And I think that did help drive up the outbound numbers as well. But then it all fell off a cliff.
Yeah. So,
like we can laugh about it now.
Yeah. Hopefully we can laugh about it forever from now. We'll see.
Let's see.
So, that's interesting. It's interesting that you bring up kind of that culture of planning. Do you feel like kind of that's where travel trade sort of fits in, or do you feel like that's why this market is so?
I think for the Japanese, there's almost a fear of messing up, right? And I think that permeates a lot of things that they do, including understanding of their itinerary for a holiday, and planning it to the minute detail. When I go out of the hotel, do I turn left or right? So they can really get into the detail of things. So I think that is quite an important point.
Nice. And so, kind of following that, like we've seen the rise of OTAs and popularization in Japan. With OTAs, do you feel like that's more of a complementary thing? Like there are a lot of opportunities for partnerships, or do you view it as more of like a competition for the travel trade here in Japan?
So AVIAREPS primarily in Japan is a destination marketing and hotel PR company. And we've pivoted to adapt and do a lot more on trade promotion, food trade promotion, wine promotion. There's a lot of overlap actually. But primarily we're a marketing business. So we don't actually sell travel trade product. So in that sense, neither the travel trade or OTAs are competitors. But, you know, we stick to some, you know, if we go back to very basic marketing fundamentals, you know, most of your marketing needs to do two things. It needs to, one, either maintain or increase the amount of product availability, and two, in equal measure, you need to maintain or increase the amount of mental availability of your product. That is, people can remember what your product is, right? And coming to your question about OTAs, actually OTAs do a really good job of increasing the amount of product available, and also they're very good at their comms and their marketing and pounding out a steady beat of communication, which helps people to remember the distinctiveness of a message. So yeah, OTAs and more recently meta searches like Line Travel and Skyscanner, partners and important partners. But the Japanese travel trade was, up until December 2019, a very important player in the market, and I suspect they will be going forward as well.
Nice, thank you. And kind of following on that as well, like looking towards that future, this year, next year, what do you feel, actually you have a term that you've coined that I think is really interesting, and it's post-traumatic growth, and maybe if you could explain what that is, and then maybe where we are in that timeline and where you see that as for the future.
Yeah, I should probably first say it's probably not my own. I probably got it from a book somewhere. But I like the idea because I guess more commonly used is post-traumatic stress syndrome, right? But from trauma and difficulty, it is also possible to, you know, recover back better and more strongly. So I think with the exception of hospitals, travel and tourism has probably been the worst hit out of all of this, I would imagine. And it was exacerbated by the fact at the point that this hit, the industry had pretty much 5 years of very good growth. I think 2019 ended up with about 1.4 billion total travelers, journeys. Wow. Of which Japan provided 50 million, 30 million in, 20 million out. So not only was this incident long, it also went from the biggest peak to the biggest trough in well, from our perspective, 3 weeks, as it happens, 3 to 4 weeks. So it was really tough. And when you're at the top of a boom, and you know this once you've been at the top of a boom, although often people don't realize it at the time, it's easier to make money. It's really not that hard to make money when there's more travelers than there are hotel rooms. It is much harder to make money now. There are no travelers and lots of hotel rooms. So people have to think much more about who is my guest? What are the problems that keeps them awake at night? How can I find solutions to those problems? And then how do I get that message to them? What are the channels that I should be using to activate that? So I think that hard times force people to adapt and to think and to do more because there is less. There's a tiny pie left. And simply dropping your price is not really going to be the way out of this. I mean, you can sort of see it just walking around here in Jingumae, and also around where I live, and then I'm sure where you've seen it. There's cafes and bars that have little signs out saying remote working space, 3,000 yen for, I don't know, 4 hours a day. Is that good? I don't know. Because I mean, what about your Wi-Fi in that space? Do you have Wi-Fi? Does it work? You know, so they can kind of see that I've got an empty space and there's all these people working in their apartments, but they're already paying rent or mortgage in their apartment, and they've got Wi-Fi there. So there needs to be much greater thought process about what am I offering, for example, in this case, for the remote worker, what are the problems that keeps a remote worker awake at night? I kind of imagine it's Wi-Fi. I think it's probably consistency and speed of Wi-Fi. Space, is it, can I deep work, can I collaborate? So I think all of those things need to be thought through, and I think we're starting to see that. So I think that's where you can have some quite decent revenue generation if you capture a market early and think who's my target market and what are their problems.
Definitely, and I think that what you're saying about kind of you almost find what's really working about your business when there is such a steep decline, because when things are good, you can kind of almost do anything and then things are going to stay good. But if things are bad, you really have to look at, okay, what's making us good and what can we capitalize on now?
I think so. So I think that's where it could be positive.
For sure. And one of the things that I've heard you talk about before was like this idea of like starting really super local and then kind of growing into, as things get hopefully better with the pandemic, kind of growing into what like international travel again and the areas that are perceived safe.
I mean, I think that flip already happened in Japan. Particularly, we had such a good summer and autumn with the Go To Travel campaign, which really drove domestic travel and forced people. I mean, the businesses realised that was the only option they had. So I think the switch from like a very inbound conversation to okay, let's capture the market we've got had already happened, and I suspect we'll see a similar pattern this year. I don't really expect much inbound to happen this year, to be honest. I think maybe back end might do. There's too many uncontrollables in there. We don't know when immigration will be switched on. We don't know if you need 2 PCR tests and a vaccine to fly, or 1 vaccine and a PCR test, or you don't need, who knows, right? There's too many variables.
1 PCR.
Exactly. What combination will you need, right? So I think the focus probably for the next 12 months will be that domestic market, which is great news for Japan. You know, roughly 84% of all tourism receipts in Japan come from the domestic market, even when there was 30 million inbound. So it's a pretty viable domestic market for the next year, 18 months or so.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear. I know that, I think the Go To campaign was super interesting. I think almost everyone I know had used it at one point. And so, I can't imagine that would be bad. And as far as like that international travel, like what do you see as kind of being that timeline? I guess you mentioned 12 months to like how, I mean, this is like, do you have a crystal ball?
No, I've been using that crystal ball quite a lot, and basically it's rubbish. The amount of times every single talking head in the tourism industry has slipped up on this, so I'm not going to be drawn on it. I guess I mean, like the UK recently, this week I think, laid out its timeline for recovery and sort of key factors that would allow travel to happen again. There's too many unknowns at the moment. I mean, like if we're saying when would it get back to where it was at December 2019, honestly, it could be another 5 years, right?
That's fair.
But I think we will start to see some fairly determined travellers quite quickly once they're able to do it. But I mean, and also it really depends, actually. I mean, part of the reason travel was able to grow so much was the airlines. The airlines are really good at lean revenue management, and particularly if the front of their plane is full with business travellers, it doesn't really matter. It does matter, but it's less important what the price of the ticket at the back of the bus is. So that enabled a volume of tourism to grow quite rapidly because effectively business class was subsidising economy class.
That's fair.
So and that is an economies of scale, which is not going to come back for a while. So it will really depend on how quickly business travel picks up and fills the business classes in order to start subsidizing the economy tickets. Or alternatively, you may see the fact that many people who have been locked down can't spend any money, so they're prepared to spend a bit more on their economy class ticket just to get away from wherever it is they've been for the last 12, by the time they can leave their country, 15, 16, 17 months, right? So it's difficult to see how that comes back. But there were some factors that really facilitated those large tourism numbers.
That's super interesting. And I think that what you touched on now with like that just want to get out, like I've talked to a lot of people in my network internationally, and like they're like, I'm coming to Japan. Like as soon as I'm counting the days when they open the borders, like I'm coming. And for me, I know just like my family in the States, like I just am like, as soon as I can like safely fly and everyone's taken care of, I'm gonna go. Like,
have you been back to the States since?
I haven't.
So,
And so like for me, just that thought, and like we're at the point now where like talking to my wife is like we're ready to spend the money, like whatever that cost is, like we're just going to do. Exactly.
But again, that's I guess where we're quite lucky in Japan, because if you really, really got too much, you could, after the state of emergency is finished, jump on a plane and get down to Naha or somewhere, right?
Yeah,
it does
so
feel slightly different.
Yeah.
So we're lucky in that way.
So as far as like the growth and inbound tourism, like what are some of the main changes maybe you've seen in Japan as a result?
Well, we sort of started at the top of this interview talking a little bit about internationalism of London and Singapore. And I think certainly Tokyo has become more international friendly. It wasn't that long ago, if you went into a coffee shop, the barista would not speak English to you. I mean, it didn't matter, I could speak Japanese, I can order a coffee in Japanese, no problem. But now they do. And I think also the other interesting thing, so I'm vegetarian and have been for my sins for like 30 odd years. Yeah, that probably reveals my age a little bit. But anyhow,
that's awesome.
When I first came to Japan in the late 1990s, and I'd say, okay, well, can I have that salad, but nikanashi, no meat, please? It was like a real problem. And even when I came back in 2012, trying to get a decent vegetarian was quite hard work. But I think with the inflows of inbound and the variety of different tastes, whether it's halal or kosher or vegetarian or vegan, has the demand for that has forced the supply side to change a little bit. I mean, just down here you've got Superiority Burger and you had La Paz up there, so these vegetarian vegan places sprung up a lot. So one of the subjective benefits to me, suddenly I've got a range of restaurants I can go to and eat. Whereas once upon a time it would be like, as much as I love Indian curry and pizza, they were the only places I could really go because guaranteed to get some vegetarian food. So that sort of diversity of food product, and as you know, one thing Japan does extraordinarily well is food, not just sushi, sashimi, and all of the Japanese foods. It doesn't really matter what food. The Japanese are exceptional at delivering it, serving it, and usually at a fairly robust price point, a really aggressive price point, right? So they've taken that and thrown all their energies at the vegan market and vegetarian market. It's fantastic. So happy.
That's great. I mean, even Moss Burger, I think has like a
Moss
burger.
Burger's picked up on it. And interestingly, I think it's the bigger international chains. I don't think McDonald's does, and I'm not sure.
I don't think they have one. I don't think.
But the local Japanese chains have. So that's quite interesting. You would expect them to be followers rather than leaders, but in this case, they're clearly setting market trend.
It's really awesome to see.
Which I guess with Moss particularly, which I think is quite a domestic, no offense to Moss, I think it caters primarily for the Japanese market. It shows that Japanese tastes are changing as well, I imagine.
That's totally fair.
To that.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing like even further developments. Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are vegan, and so like I remember when they would visit me before, they would be like, "Well, I want to eat ramen," and so they're just like, they would break it or just be like, "I guess not this time." And so it's cool to see those developments. And
the Natural Lawson has vegan ramen.
That's amazing. Yeah. I didn't even know that. I'll have to tell them.
So I honestly 3-4 years ago I couldn't have even imagined that. So I think those sort of things it's been good.
Yeah, super true. And kind of continuing on that, in Japan, as sure everybody knows, like the Olympics were pushed back to this year. It's the topic we're looking forward to the most. For you, I know we've had conversations around this, but like for you, there's basically two options at this point now, where either it happens or if it doesn't happen, like what do those two scenarios kind of look like or play out like?
So I mean, subjectively and very personally, I'd love the Olympics to happen. We're just a kilometre away, not even that probably from the stadium. Right, imagine if Tokyo was full of some of the world's best athletes, how cool it would be. Whether it happens or whether it doesn't, I don't know. Well, not something I would be drawn on, but I think it is important to think from tourism perspective, what does the Olympics do or deliver? And in terms of the event itself, in any Olympic year, I think since Sydney in 2000, it's been a loss leader for tourism. The numbers in the Olympic year go down, or at the very best remain flat. Unlike the Football World Cup or the Rugby World Cup, the Olympics doesn't attract a very big physical audience. And because there is a lot of corporate sponsorship, prices tend to go up. That means that large tourism groups don't come. And so actually, in terms of the Olympic year, it is usually a lost leader for tourism. However, what you do have with the Olympics and what London did with the Olympics and what actually Russia did really well with the World Cup, I have no idea, 2018? I've lost track of time. I think 2018 was they showcased their country to a TV audience of billions. I think London did a supreme job in 2012, and Russia as well for the World Cup, to showcase, and perhaps for Russia specifically, I think they broke a lot of stereotypes. That World Cup looked really colourful and fun and exciting, and my image of Russia probably was probably from the late 1980s, and so it really changed how I thought. So if the Olympics happens in Japan, what will it showcase to the rest of the world? Because I think in order to make it happen, it's going to have to be quite a bureaucratic process-led, medically sterile type of event. And I'm not sure how well that would play out on TV, to be honest, because it's unlikely that many people will physically be able to go. So I think that's an important consideration, because what the Olympics did for London, I think when London had the Olympics, maybe it was around 28 million inbound tourists in 2012, and just before we dropped off the cliff, they'd hit 40 million. So there was a 12 million passenger growth in 8 years, less than 8 years. So it can be a very powerful piece of PR.
That's
fortunately, we had the Rugby World Cup, which I think did a really good job of doing exactly the same thing. So, what do you want out of the Olympics? Clearly, it's a great sporting event, but it's also entertainment. And you don't want to stifle that entertainment through having to have so many restrictions, and not even the athletes can really enjoy it. You need to have, it needs to be a celebration. So let's see.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and so that's super interesting. So kind of even if, like, I feel like a lot of people are maybe expecting this huge growth year this year.
It never is. And I think that has always been something that many people in Tokyo thought that, okay, 2020 or the Olympics event drives tourism. Actually showcasing the Olympic event around the world drives tourism after the event.
That's
for the event itself and the event year, it'll be dead. Wow. It was always going to be dead. Because no one's going to come because nobody wants to pay Olympic prices.
That's fair. That's fair.
So Yeah, so let's see.
Yeah, and continuing on that thought, where kind of providing that maybe sterile environment, like hospitality has also been pretty hard for the past year. How do you see those changes happening? Like, what does hospitality look like in the coming years as far as technology?
In general, I think let's talk about hotels specifically a little bit. So, hotels are as close to their customer as any business can possibly be. From the moment the doorman opens it and you speak to the concierge and you check in and the general manager says hi when he's doing his walk around, there's so many human touch points, right? And hotels were exceptionally good at working out what their customers want because they spoke to them and saw them every single day. So it will be, and they haven't had that for like a year. So I think that's quite a challenge because maybe the customer has changed a little bit and the hotels perhaps have yet to understand that because they haven't got that many customers.
You're not seeing them every day.
You're not seeing them every day, which is a really important point. I can see developments going two ways and probably at the same time in many cases. I could see there being a desire for high-tech, low-touch. So you check in yourself. You have limited interaction with other humans in a safe environment. But on the flip side, I suspect there will be, and I think I would fall more into this category, after a year or so of isolation, actually, I'd really like to talk to other people and see other people and interact with other people. I really want that a lot. So I could also see there being a desire for more human contact as well. And I think it will you'll have to sort of play it by ear to see how that pans out. There may be a blended approach to it where, perhaps the TV remote control goes and you have Siri instead,
voice,
right?
That's totally true,
So that sort of thing, I think you could start to see happening quite a lot. Also in Japan, when you look at the hotel landscape, it's quite a disparate landscape in that, give or take, 85 to 90% of all hotel properties are unbranded or do not have a affiliation to either a domestic or an international brand. They're standalone properties. They can make money because there's more demand than there is supply, but that has changed. So I think we might see a growth in the lifestyle sector, in the boutique sector, in sort of niche hotels, whether it's the beer hotel setting up or a sake hotel setting up. I could see that happening quite a lot because there's a lot of property out there that's good quality property, but is not going to be able to survive without 30 million inbound tourists, which is not going to happen for a little while. So I think we might be able to see some development in that quite quickly, and that feels where the most exciting opportunity is. And if you look around some of the things that have been happening, so for example, there's a Scottish company called Brewdog who are craft beer company. But they've set up a beer hotel in Manchester, and each room has beer on tap, which I thought was a super idea. I could see that kind of thing working here, like a sake with sake on tap, for example. So I think those sort of developments are, and this comes back to that post-traumatic growth. It's forcing people to think, what exactly is it they want? When there's more customers than you have rooms, doesn't really matter. You've got other customers to choose if you don't quite get it right. But now you've really got to get it right to get a slice of that small pie and survive in the next 12 to 24 months, which are going to be pretty tough, I think.
That's totally fair. Yeah, it's interesting even talking about like malls, because like in Japan it seems like malls are doing pretty okay. There's new shopping centers opening. In America, I think this was like the nail in the coffin, like things were going down already, and kind of talking about that same sort of thing where you're talking about the beer hotel. like what are malls going to look like next, and it really has to
vaccination
shift.
centers.
Just take
it over.
Get to the wall. Yeah, and so and I think really shifting that mindset to what kind of experience do people really want from wherever they're going is going to be, I hope at least, that it's going to be really interesting to see, and we'll see more innovative things like a beer hotel. Or
and it's all, the flip side of that is, what experience do you not want?
That's
right.
right.
Do you? It may well be that people do not want an entirely automated process. Like we said, they may crave human interaction.
I'm taking phone calls now, which is like, that has not happened in years.
Please, somebody call me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's a big shift. You're not wrong. Like it's been surreal. Like I feel like even for me, where most of my family and my friends are all in the States, and like I was pretty good at just kind of talking with them on the internet, and now it's like we'll have a weekly Zoom meeting or something. Like people I hadn't seen in years, and I'm having Zoom meetings with them all the time now. So it's really shifted.
So I think revenge tourism, revenge shopping, revenge dining will come back. I suppose for us in Japan, we've been reasonably lucky because we haven't really been too much pinned down. To be honest, we've had reasonable flexibility in movement, as long as it's not after 8 p.m. Although I do recall last year Shibuya and Shinjuku just being ghost towns, which was really kind of odd. Everything shuttered up, right? But I think for the rest of the certain parts of the rest of the world, and I'm thinking the US and the UK and parts of Europe, there will certainly be. The lockdowns mean that savings ratio has increased incredibly. So there's money to be spent, and people are desperate to spend it.
That's fair.
Particularly in the UK, they want sunshine, right? They haven't had any for like 18 months or something. So they definitely need to get even if it's to get to Greece or to southern Spain or 12 hours on a flight to Japan and get some East Asian sunshine. That it would certainly be something that would be good for everybody.
That's great. And continuing there, like, where are maybe your favorite destinations in Japan? Anywhere you'd want to recommend, or if you have clients you want to shout out now, feel free.
No, I think for destinations in Japan, there's plenty for everyone. I was lucky enough to go and visit Okinawa a couple of times last year and was quite struck by how dynamic Naha is. Really liked it there. I've lived in Fukuoka. That kind of still feels like my home city for Japan, so I think that has a great sense to it. But there's plenty of places to go. And in many cases, it's the people, isn't it, that make the place, to be honest. It's a bit of a cliche. And I think many visitors, when they come to Japan, are struck by many things, but the one they probably talk about the most is, how friendly the people were. We had this conversation with Guy. He spoke no English, I spoke no Japanese, but we ended up drinking until whatever time it was in the morning. Is quite a common story, right? And I suppose the further you get out of the cities and into the countryside, whether it's even into Shizuoka or Gunma or deep countryside like Miyazaki or Kagoshima, the more those experiences are likely to happen. So I think those are always the places. I mean, there's too many to mention, right? Basically, is the long and short of it. It's something for everyone. And how about yourself?
I mean, for me, I haven't traveled as much as I would like, even in Japan. But I really want to go to Okinawa. I've never been, so that's where everyone seems to be. Like last year with the Go to Travel campaign, that's the number one destination. But I go to Nikko. It's somewhat often.
I've not been there. I've heard it's really nice.
For just like the onsens and stuff. It's like pretty close. And my wife's parents live in Tochigi, so we go there and then we go into Nikko after that. And it's always fun. And it snows, and I'm from California, where it does not.
Wow, what is this stuff?
Exactly. And so for me, it's like a really exciting experience just to get to see snow.
Where's Daddy? He's outside doing snow angels again.
And my daughter likes snow a little bit. She's only seen a bit, but my wife hates the cold, and so like we'll go and she'll stay inside, and I'll be kind of like playing out in the snow. And so I think if things turn up this year, then we'll probably spend some time out there. But yeah, hopefully
I think I mean, Japan, like even Tokyo, when I go to Shinagawa-ku, I think, really, wow. But it's just a different city within Tokyo. And I'm basically have spent my 8 years here in I'm a Shinjuku boy. And so Shibuya is our near neighbor, and Jingu is kind of on the border, right? But when you go to other cities, I think, wow, this is really different. It's like a different place because it's so big. So there's so much to discover. I think, the other thing is local knowledge in Japan. I think it's kind of important to have someone to guide you around. That's fair, to open it, like you said, Nikko, because your wife's parents are there, so they kind of know the ins and outs. But it would be quite a hard place to discover and find it all out on yourself without someone. Right?
You have to take a bus. It's
well, even once you're there, how do you know what is the good yakiniku, or where do you get the vegetarian from, or where? It's a country of many secrets, and it requires connections and people to guide you through it.
That's totally fair.
So, like, whatever it is, wherever I've discovered a place, it's basically because somebody else knew it and showcased it to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ashley, it was a great conversation as always. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Finally, we got it done.
Yeah, exactly. Let's hope for another one soon.
We can hug and high five for the next one.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, mate. It's good to see you.